What's going on, guys? It's been a real busy weekend as Auburn continues to make their run in the NCAA tournament. Basketball-wise, is definitely March Madness, and obviously, in my opinion, Auburn is no Cinderella team. This is a team who has had, great recruiting classes under Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl did an excellent job of, film study and getting his team rallied in the right direction to put themselves in a position to be successful against one of the blue bloods in University of North Carolina as Auburn pulls off the 97-80 win over North Carolina in the Sweet 16. Now, Auburn really won't have that much time, obviously little to no time to celebrate as they take on another blue blood, but which is a familiar foe out of the SEC conference in the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, if you think about Auburn's season this year, Auburn lost 9 games, 2 of those games actually coming from the University of Kentucky. Now, the latter game against the University of Kentucky was kind of the fatal blow in this whole thing as Kentucky defeated Auburn 80-53. Now, when you look back at that ball game, Auburn just wasn't successful at doing the things that they like to do best. When you look at that game, you talk about shooting only 32% from the field. You're not going to beat many teams in the country with that. And you're definitely not going to beat a team as balanced as Kentucky is. And Auburn, I hate to use elementary terms, but they live and die by the three-point shot and only shooting 29.6% from the three-point line is just not going to make it happen. Now, going into the Elite 8 ball game against Kentucky, Auburn is going to be without some huge production and leadership out of Chuma Okeke, and they're going to have to definitely rely on some of their players on the bench and, some reserve players, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the video. Another thing that Auburn didn't do well against Kentucky that time around is they didn't have as much separation as far as turnovers goes. Kentucky had 11 turnovers. But Auburn had 9, so it was kind of even on the turnover part. Also, when you look at Auburn's weakness, their weaknesses were really exploited the first time around against Kentucky, as Kentucky had 43 rebounds and Auburn only had 24. Now, this past game with Auburn against North Carolina, they actually really started to even the playing field rebound-wise, as North Carolina had 40 rebounds and Auburn had 36, and they were pretty much dead even on defensive rebounds. So that's going to be something that's going to be very key for the Auburn Tigers going into this ball game, this Elite 8 ball game against the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky has had an incredible season, finished up second in the SEC, a regular pretty much in the NCAA tournament, arguably one of the most iconic teams in NCAA basketball, because you really can't talk about basketball as it relates to the NCAA without mentioning the likes of Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Michigan. All of those teams are pretty much regulars as far as relevance in the NCAA tournament. So as we look at the Kentucky Wildcats, we look at a very balanced starting lineup. All right, so one thing you want to mention when you talk about Kentucky is they have several guys in their starting 5 that, average, up to almost 12 points per game. You talk about P.J. Washington at 14.8 points per game, Tyler Harrell with 14.2, Keldon Johnson at 13.5, and Travis Reed at 11.3. Those are all going to pose familiar challenges to Auburn as they face in the North Carolina game. Now, one thing that Auburn was very successful at in the past game against North Carolina is they were able to get a lot of points off the bench. Auburn outscored North Carolina on the bench 40-21, and that was a huge turning point of that particular game. Auburn shot very well from the three-point line. They also they did very well in shooting field goals, and to mention, Auburn really did a great job of diversifying the areas of the court in which they shot. As of halftime of the North Carolina game, Auburn had 24 points inside. Now, I predicted, when I did coverage on the North Carolina game, I predicted that Bruce Pearl would start to attack inside because, you had to. You're just not, when you get to a point when you're just not getting enough intermediate high percentage shots around the basketball, you put yourself in harm's way when it comes to facing these blue blood type teams like Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky. Now, although the injury to Chuma Okeke would hurt, the encouraging news outside of the fact that he's going to be out for the rest of the season with an ACL injury, I mean, that's just unfortunate for a kid that was having the game of his life to go down in that manner. The Auburn Tigers continue. You'd have thought that the Auburn Tigers would, kind of fold and give North Carolina a chance to kind of steal this one at the end, but that was not at all the case. As a matter of fact, they picked up the pace and they stepped up to the challenge and went on and defeated North Carolina improbably by 17 points. So when we look at the Kentucky Wildcats tomorrow, Auburn is obviously a long way away from February when they suffered that over 20-point loss to Kentucky. Definitely a different team. Definitely a different mentality. Definitely a different level of confidence and approach to the game. One thing I really liked what I saw against North Carolina was the play of Jared Harper. Even though he didn't make that, he didn't score that many points. But what I saw in Jared Harper was he didn't put his team in harmful positions like he did during that stretch when Auburn went 8-7 and it was doubtful as to whether they were going to make the NCAA tournament. He started to make better decisions. He started to slow things down. He started to understand how important each possession is, especially down the stretch when you're trying to hang on to the lead against anybody, especially in the tournament where these things are so vital. Now, I'll go out on a limb and say this. I'm not, I really don't know a score that I could predict on this thing, but I do know that Auburn is carrying a lot of momentum into this game. It doesn't seem to be any sign of fatigue or any sign of, well, we've made it this far, we're just glad to be here. What I'm looking at is a very hungry team that belongs here. This is no Cinderella type situation. This is a team who always had the talent, great recruiting classes, but have finally found that team element, and it's really working for them right now. So I think Kentucky is in a very adverse position as they approach this game against Auburn, because Auburn is good at so many things now. Now that they've added the element of somewhat of an inside game, this could be a dangerous game for the Kentucky Wildcats. So very excited to see how this thing goes. I think Auburn is in a great position. Like I said before, from the intangibles standpoint, definitely high morale, even though losing Chuma Okeke. There's several guys just itching to step up for these Auburn Tigers to possibly carry this team on into the Final Four. Once again, it's K-Stu the GOAT for Vernon Speak Sports. Mostly talking about Auburn football, but now basketball. Y'all have forced my hand in this thing. I really, wasn't necessarily a basketball guy, but y'all forced my hand in this basketball thing. I'm enjoying it. Comment. We got a lot. The comment section is on fire. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. This thing is growing, ready to get the live chats and all those things going into the Advocare Classic, which will be taking place in Arlington, Texas, between Auburn and Oregon. Just looking forward to a great season overall for Auburn athletics. War Eagle.